That's a perfect segue into our next portion of this presentation, which is land back, food and medicine. And this is an important topic, as much of the indigenous peoples of this continent have been dispossessed of their traditional homelands, either through forced removal, genocide, or warfare. Access to our traditional medicines and foods from the land are an important part of one's cultures and absolutely necessary for healing. So in that way, I am honored to introduce Stephanie Morningstar. Stephanie is the board president, treasurer, and executive director of New England Farmers of Color Land Trust and Resources, Relationships and Reciprocity co-director. Stephanie is a citizen of the United Nations. They are an herbalist, soil and seed steward, scholar, student, and earth worker dedicated to decolonizing and liberating minds, hearts, and land, one plant, one person, ecosystem, and non-human being at a time. They will be talking to us today about the role of land trusts in reclaiming access to native lands. Thank you.
Seiko Sewa Guego, everybody. I'm Stephanie Morningstar. I'm Oneida Turtle Clan, and I am the Executive Director and Resources, Relationships, and Reciprocity Co-Director for the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust. Let's take a moment to find the headwaters of our breath and recognize and ground in why we're all here, our ancestral relationships to land and each other. This map, created by the Native Land Project, is a representation of Turtle Island's multitude of indigenous territories, languages, and peoples, freed from the colonial boundaries that have carved into the indigenous landscape. The lands I make a life on are known as the lands of the relatives of the Maple Nation, Treaty 3 and Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement territory. I'm here today to talk a little bit about the work that NEFOC does, and specifically in relationship to how we are advancing tools to undo and dismantle some of the harm that the doctrine of discovery has caused. So before we begin, I just wanted to share one of the things that we're doing in order to be able to do this, which is actually creating and illustrating or showing folks what an actively actionable land acknowledgement is. So I'm going to share really briefly our land acknowledgement in hopes that maybe folks might take a page and not just checking a land acknowledgement off the box, but also to build a little bit of action and something, a backbone into the land acknowledgement that not only acknowledges land, but also acknowledges the action steps you're taking to repair harm. Land acknowledgements are traditionally done by settlers on indigenous territory. So we don't traditionally do land acknowledgements in our own territories. But that being said, this is a very large region, and I want to just acknowledge that we are serving more than just my own homelands. So the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust exists in the spirit of active and inclusive reconciliation. We occupy and serve the territory of the Northeast, part of what is currently called the United States, a colonial framework constructed upon the living land that is Turtle Island. I am honored and grateful to stand in my territory of my homelands, Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement territory. We recognize that acknowledging the traditional territories, the original stewards of the lands, is opening a door to actionable reconciliation, repair, and relationship building. We are working to advance land access for Black, Indigenous, and people of color with an understanding that the territories we occupy hold the history and trauma of colonization, forced removal, and land theft. We embody and honor this by understanding and considering carefully how we engage the lands we may come to hold in trust through the establishment of and continuous consultation with the traditional indigenous leadership of the territories within our service area. We're also advancing strategies such as cultural respect easements, voluntary taxation, and other tools for acknowledging and repairing the complex history of colonization, and by listening and moving at the speed of trust while we do so. This is a quick just glance at a map created by the eHistory Project that shows the, in blue, the original territories in what is now called the US, and you can see in these little red, there are tiny little red sections which are reserve lands or reservation lands. And then the east part of this is actually unceded territory, the original 13 colonies. And that means that there are barely any, if any, treaties in any of those territories, meaning that this is truly stolen land. And because of that, we have a responsibility to engage the governance systems of these territories that are still unceded and that have these states superimposed on them. That actually is the keystone to some of our work, which is to advance land sovereignty in the Northeast region through permanent and secure land tenure for Indigenous, Black, Latinx, and Asian farmers and land stewards who will work with the land in a manner that is sacred and honors our ancestors' collective dreams for sustainable farming, human habitat, ceremony, native ecosystem, and cultural preservation. We're honoring these relationships in the fact that this is stolen land by some relationship Indigenous communities and acknowledging that this is unceded territory. So we really need the permission and the voice of these folks in order to be able to do anything on their homelands. So I just wanted to be clear about that, as the work for the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust truly is a desire to connect people of color farmers to land to grow healthy foods and medicines for our communities. And we plan to accomplish this by returning land to Indigenous, Black, and POC farmers and land stewards while centering and respecting the Indigenous rights and responsibilities in these homelands. So at our outset, we've built in some accountability mechanisms that have been identified and will be added to our bylaws. That really honor the rights and responsibilities of Indigenous communities as NEFOC Land Trust projects take place on their ancestral territories. So we are establishing co-created spaces within which to understand each other better, and our work will happen on the land, in our offices, in ceremony, at kitchen tables, over the phone and internet, and in community. It's deeply, deeply rooted in building relationships with one another. And I just wanted to be clear about that the work that we're doing is truly really centering those relationships. I want to say thank you, Nyawagoa, to everybody for participating in today's activities. Thanks so much for learning a little bit about Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust. And I'm really grateful to be with this today.